Hello, and welcome, Veritas Seekers. This episode is going to be dedicated to the word definitions. You see, society right now is changing what is a word and the definition of a word. A lot of this is happening as a Christian conservative libertarian. I actually believe the entire government is corrupt. I think both Republican and Democrat government officials are corrupt, okay? But in the media right now, the media has, they're right is doing it too. I'm not going to say they're not. But I've seen, with my viewpoint, I've seen the left being the majority of people who are changing word definitions to fit their narrative. They're using words like extremist, terrorist, racist, bigot, homophobic. They're using all these terms in a wrong way that does not match what it actually means, okay? They use it as a way to silence anyone who does not agree with their viewpoint. And that's not okay, because that's not what these word definitions mean. It does not mean opposing the viewpoints of the left. Extremist and terrorist are huge things. I don't remember if it was last year, it might have been 2 years ago. Facebook came out with a post about, what they did was they brought anything that was conservative articles, okay? Any conservative article they came out with would have a little byline underneath it, how they would do it, where they would have a byline and it would say, hey, if you or a loved one has been exposed to extremism, you can go to this link to get help. And you go to the link and it's basically a group of people who are like against right-wing extremism and like this whole spiel about how right-wing was, awful and stuff. And they're on these articles that are just conservative. They're not articles about calling to action, fighting back with guns and bombs, and they're not saying anything about any violence being committed. The articles did not say anything about that. So why are you putting it just on the conservative articles that are not even calling violence against anyone? And you're only putting on their articles, but not the left-leaning articles. Like, how is that extremism? Just being, like, I've been called an extremist. I've been called a terrorist just because I'm a pro-lifer. Just because I'm a Christian conservative. Like, that's crazy. I don't call for violence. I don't silence speech. I don't shut down the conversation. Like, I believe in conversation. I believe, as a libertarian, I believe in everyone having the right to say what they believe. And I will talk with people who would have a different viewpoint. If they can stop name-calling me and have a logical argument, I'm going to listen to them. Even if I disagree with them, I will listen to them because I respect them. If they can do that, if they can have a logical argument without name-calling me, that gives me automatic respect towards them, okay? So extremism definition examples. It talks a lot about military coups and stuff. You can see all these things over here. People use, January 6th as an example of right-wing extremism. And to a point it was. Like, I disagree with it. The second it happened, I disagreed with it and I called it out. Most conservatives did the same. Most of us did not agree with it. I do think that there are people who were involved who were there to purposely cause issues that were not actually conservatives. But that's my opinion. I still, regardless, disagree with it. I had a friend who was there, and I disagreed with him being there. But I also disagree with Trump as well, because as a libertarian, I don't like Biden or Trump. But yet they were extremists in some capacity a little bit, but the left did the same thing and no one cared. In fact, the left government officials praised it as democracy in action. And they told their crowd, they told the people who were there to find like they showed them where the tunnel was, to find the Republicans who were trying to run away from these people. I can't remember where it was, if it was Michigan or Washington, or it was, you can Google it. Google liberals storm state capitol. Okay. They did it too. And the left did not care. The left didn't care. Both sides were extremists because they were, using violence to make their point. And that's not okay. That's not okay. I'm for protection. So if someone comes for children, or comes for an innocent person, I'm okay with protecting them. But I'm not going to be offense and make the first move. Okay? That's not okay. So that would be examples of real terrorism. An everyday conservative person who disagrees with the left's ideology is not a terrorist or an extremist. And terrorist would be, if you're a domestic terrorist, violent criminal acts committed by individuals or groups to further ideological goals stemming from domestic influence. See, so it says criminal violent acts. I have not committed any criminal violent acts, and most of us haven't. And being called by the news media, by Facebook, social media, being called extremists and terrorists, redefining what those terms mean, is not okay. That is not okay. You're using it to weaponize difference of opinions and make people hate each other. Let's move on to love. And actually, not just the left, but society as a whole has a different love definition than my own, and by the biblical standard of love. Okay. So the society word definition of love is a intense feeling of deep affection or a feeling of deep romantic or sexual attachment to someone. So again, it's a feeling in society's definition. And that's not what it is. Because if that's what it was, then love is stupid. Love is weak. Love is like all over the place, and you can't count on love. If that's what love is. If love is a feeling, you cannot count on love, because feelings are not forever. They change so quickly. They're fickle. They change. You move on. Something you felt one point changes to the next so quickly. So if love is a feeling, then falling in out of love is true, because that's what happens. Feelings will happen, come and go. They'll change. But that's why love is an action, despite what you feel. Love is an action. It's wanting the good of the other. God shows us, because He is love. God is love. He's the definition of what love really, truly is. And His characteristic shows us love. So we base what love is based on who He is. And that means it's wanting the good of the other person. Wanting the good of the other person does not mean agreement, and it does not mean helping those people get what they want. Because, take for example, alcohol. I have an alcohol problem. I am almost 3 months sober. I was almost a year sober, and I fell off. And when I did fall off, instead of people who came around me to try to talk me to get back on the wagon, to help me around, they encouraged it. They, had drinking in their houses and in the bars and stuff. No one tried to talk me out of it. And I know that they didn't mean anything by it. They were just like, she's an adult, she can do what she wants. But I also need someone who will convict me, who will stand up to me and tell me, no, that is not good for you. I love you, and, you are an adult who can do what you want, but I'm telling you, that is not good for you. You should not be doing that. That is what love is. Standing up to people when you need to be stood up to. Like, if someone is doing something that's going to hurt themselves, you tell them. You don't give in to them. You don't celebrate when they're doing wrong or when they're hurting themselves. You stand up to them. True love hurts sometimes. I wish I had more people who could show me true love at times. I need it because I'm very undisciplined. I'm very people pleaser. I love to people please. I love to just do whatever everyone else is doing. It's hard for me to take a stand myself. So I need people who will stand up to me, who can take a stand for me. So that's another word definition that has changed or is different from person to person. Deconstruction is a big one in our society right now. One of my favorite podcasters is a man called John Cooper of Skillet. You can see I was humongous Panhead back in the day. I still like their music a little bit, but I love John Cooper's podcast. He talks a lot about it. He talks about it way better than I could. But basically, deconstruction can mean two different things. As a Christian deconstruction can mean two different things, okay? Number one is the good kind. Christian deconstruction can mean that you are realizing that American Christianity is not always correct, that sometimes what your preacher says does not line up with the Bible, and that you only go to church on Sundays and don't actually have your own faith or understand what that means to be a Christian. So a Christian deconstruction can really mean, if you use it this way, which I think there should be a new term for it this way, but it can mean that you are putting aside your preconceived notions about things and reading the Bible for yourself, studying it, realizing what you think may not line up with the Bible, and changing what you think to line up with the Bible. There are some theology stuff out there in society that is not biblical, and if you're looking for yourself to deconstruct from those opinions to biblical lens, that's a good thing. But the majority of people who say they're deconstructing does not mean that. The majority of people are either leaving the faith altogether, they're deconstructing and leaving Christianity, or they're deconstructing and going to progressivism and liberal Christian and the woke crowd, okay? As John Cooper says, you get woke cookies if you deconstruct to go towards their side, okay? So what that means is you stop believing biblical doctrine and you start picking and choosing from the Bible, and you use society lens to look at the Bible and to update the Bible to society's way of thinking. So a lot of progressive liberal Christians will say, oh, Jesus was liberal. He was, for the homeless, for the sick. He was for the minorities and the sinful people. He sat down and ate with sinners. He was okay with everyone. He loved people, and the only people he was not okay with the religious people. And so, it's the religious people that are evil, and we should just all be okay with people who doing whatever they want. Like, you were born this way, you can do what you want, God loves you regardless. That is what the deconstruction view is for the majority of people. They either leave Christianity or they believe that. Okay? The actual definition means a critical analysis, I can't speak sometimes, but of philosophical and literary language which emphasizes the eternal workings of language and conceptual systems, the relational quality of meaning, and the assumptions implicit in forms of expression. So, to dumb it down, it's just critical thinking over ideas and concepts, and how they relate to each other. Okay, so it's stopping assuming things and actually look into things, which is a good thing. Okay, but that's not what Christian deconstructionalists are doing. They're not just looking into things. They're using society to have a lens of how to think. They're not thinking for themselves. They're thinking based on society. Yeah. So there is that. I urge you to look into the Cooper Stuff podcast because he says things way better than I can. He is an amazing singer, an amazing musician, and also amazing speaker. I am not a public speaker. The only reason I'm making this channel is more for myself, because I needed a place to outpour all my thoughts to. I'm not a good public speaker by any means, and no one's probably going to care about my talking, okay? People are probably not going to even be going in this far into the podcast anyways. But look into him, look into his episodes on deconstruction. They're really important, especially in the Christian music industry. I don't know if I think I've talked about this. I'm in the Christian music industry myself, not like Skillet is. I'm nobody, but my nobody self has seen some crazy stuff and some saddening stuff. And definitely got to pray for them, pray for the music community as a whole, pray for deconstructionists, because I don't think some of them are meaning harm. I think they are hurt and confused, and they have confused Christians with Jesus, and they've confused the truth with society. So, and the last thing I'm going to talk about is photography. As a photographer, there's a lot of gatekeepers in photography. Even people I care about gatekeep photography. Not as bad as some of the others, though, but people... I hadn't used the word photographer for so many years. Like, someone would say, hey, here's a photographer. I would be like, I'm not a photographer. For years, even though I had a camera that I would take with me everywhere and I would photograph everything, I still wouldn't call myself that because of people who gatekeeped, because of the preconceived notion that you have to have a DSLR, which I now have. You have to have a DSLR camera, and you have to know how to use editing very well, and you have to get paid for it, which I don't get paid for it, by the way. All these criteria, like you have to be in you can't be in automatic mode. You have to be in manual mode. You have to understanding how flash photography works. You have to use RAW instead of JPEG. Yeah, all this stuff to be a photographer. That's not how it works. Okay, photography is an art form. Okay, so you wouldn't call a painter not a painter because they're not professional. They don't get paid for their work. They don't have the best paintings in the world. You wouldn't say they're not a painter. Or if you have what else is there? If you have a guitarist, if they're not Skillet, you wouldn't call them not a guitarist because they're not making hundreds of thousands of money or touring nonstop. Like, stop gatekeeping photography. It doesn't have to be professional and to your standards for it to be photography, okay? Anyone who has a passion to take pictures and uses it as their expression of the world, that is a photographer. I've been a photographer since I was 7-8 years old, and I've only called myself one since 2 years ago, like 26 years old, okay? because of the criteria. And some people still wouldn't call me a professional photographer because I don't get paid. Photographer in Cambridge Dictionary, a person who takes photographs either as a job or a hobby. If it's a hobby, like me, it's a hobby. You're still a photographer. If it's not the best picture in the world, you're still a photographer. Okay. Now, maybe taking selfies of yourself. I wouldn't call yourself a photographer for that, because you're just taking pictures of yourself. But if you're taking things around you and it's the expression of your worldview and, your art form, then you're a photographer. That's my personal opinion. Stop gatekeeping photography. Stop saying people who shoot JPEG and who shoot in automatic are not photographers. Okay. We all take pictures in our own ways. We edit in our own ways. It's okay. It's all a process. We're all learning as we go. Okay? We all learn, we all grow, but we can still be a photographer. That's my spiel on some of these word definitions that society likes to change or say is different than my own definition. So look into when you're having a argument or a conversation, a discussion with someone that has a different viewpoint than you, before you get into those viewpoints, make sure your word definitions line up. Otherwise, you're going to be arguing needlessly over something you can't even agree on because you have different definition of something. If I am going to argue about deconstruction and they're just saying, oh, it's just someone who is taking away their preconceived notion of something and looking to the Bible for confirmation, then I'm arguing with them needlessly because I agree with that definition. Like, I agree with them doing that. So there would be no point to me arguing with this person. Learn what they mean by their definition before you argue with someone. Racism is bad, but I believe racism is not just a black problem. Like, any skin color can be racist towards the other. I'm sorry. That's my opinion. I mean, disagree with me all you want. Say that only minorities can have racist towards them, like have racism towards them. That can be your opinion, but that's not the truth, in my opinion. Okay? Where definitions matter, how a side uses it matters, and if they are weaponizing language to overpower the other viewpoint, that is not a good thing. When you silence the opposition, that is not a good thing. When you call people terrorists and extremists for a different viewpoint, that is not a good thing. Stop using language to be weaponized to make your viewpoint. If your viewpoint is so righteous, you don't need to down the other side. You don't need to name call the other side and say the other side is evil if your viewpoint is so important and so right. Just a thought. This has been the third podcast episode, and I hope you guys have learned something, that even if you disagree with me, that you can understand where I'm coming from. Keep looking for the truth and keep fighting. Love you guys. Bye.